What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Black Professionals Project. Thank you all for tuning in again. We are here with yet another professional, and she is not just a professional, but she is a doctor. It may be the doctor that you think, maybe the doctor you don't think, but you'll see here soon. So I would like to introduce our next professional, which is Dr. Queen.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you. I appreciate you joining us and sharing your information and wisdom with everybody here on the platform. So first thing I want to start with is, what age group are you in? What is your ethnicity and where are you from?
I'm in I guess you would call it the 25 to 35 age group.
Okay.
And my ethnicity, Is that what you asked? Okay, it would be African American.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then where are you from?
I am from Maryland. My hometown is in Central Maryland.
Okay, gotcha. So not necessarily DMV area, but still included.
It's in the DMV area.
Okay, so still included. Okay, got you. Great. Yeah, I have some friends that live out there, and I've been out there a couple times, and I love going out there. So it's a good time. So what is your profession, and what would you say is your industry?
My industry, I would say my background is biomedical research, but I'm a microbiologist, and right now I'm in the nonprofit industry.
Awesome. That's great. So what got you interested in doing this thing? Because a lot of people, I'm sure as children, probably haven't even heard of what microbiology is. So what made you become a microbiologist?
Okay, well, I guess I'll start with explaining what a microbiologist is. So a microbiologist is someone who studies microorganisms, and those include organisms such as bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. And for me, I didn't always know I wanted to be a microbiologist. Basically, my senior year in high school, I took AP Bio and AP Psychology. I'm like, all right, I'm going to choose one or the other. What's it going to be? So I went with biology. And I had my first couple of years in undergrad, and then I took a microbiology course. And I loved it. And it was challenging, but my professor, she was really creative. We didn't have a lot of funding in my undergrad, so she really tried to, be really creative, creating laboratories for us, and just the way that she taught, it really drew me in. And it's funny, like that same year, I started reading this book called The Hot Zone by Richard Preston. And so that book was like about a viral Ebola outbreak, which is so relevant to today's world. I was so fascinated about it. I was like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be in spacesuits, work with viruses, and, save the world. And like from there, it kind of like built up. And then for me, my senior year, we had a new microbiology instructor. And I was like, well, I want to take her course because she was a medical doctor. So it was really different because she taught medical micro. So there's been a lot of focus on infectious diseases and things like that. And she was awesome too, because she also she took us on field trips, and she just had a really creative way of teaching. And I think a combination of that and some mentors that I had that, it was kind of like signed, sealed, and delivered. So when I graduated, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a microbiologist. I know with my biology degree, I can only go but so far. So if I really want to, go into research and try different things, I'm going to have to go to grad school. So I applied. I got into Howard University, and
HU?
There,
That's cool. Mm-hmm. I think that's a great, a great start into it. I had a similar story. I don't know if you're familiar with my background, but I also have my graduate degree in microbiology. I have my master's instead of my Ph.D. And I really enjoy it. I love the science. I love the feeling of just knowing something that somebody else on the planet, like no one else on the planet knows, for even just a small moment, and being able to share that information with everybody and make an impact. Mm-hmm. So that really just drew me in.
See, I love, I'm biased. I always call it Team Micro whenever I meet another microbiologist. but but no, it's super cool. And it's so funny because I'm such a germaphobe. So like the fact that I've decided to have a career working with the most dangerous things, but I guess it makes sense, you're controlling your fear by working with them. Mm-hmm. But it's been great. And I think that the most important thing is that I learned that over time, that there's so much that you can do with your career, because like when I was in school, all we're taught is, for the most part, is either you're going to be a research in a laboratory or you're going to be a professor. Mm-hmm. And then you're kind of like stuck in that frame of thinking until over time you start to learn, oh wow, a microbiologist is doing this, we can do that. And so like it builds up from there.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I know when I was in undergraduate getting my biology degree, looking at all the things I can do with my degree, everybody in my department told me there's so many things you can do, there's so many options, but nobody gave me any specifics. So I had no idea what exactly it was I could do. And when you search it, there's always so many options. But I know going to graduate school really helped me narrow that down, going to conferences and talking with professionals like yourself and really understanding, what is it that makes me excited and how can I apply my technical background to that and have some value and contribute. So I definitely echo in your story there for sure. So talk to us about what it is to be a microbiologist on a day-to-day basis. So what's your day in the life like for Dr. Queen?
So a day in the life of a microbiologist. I feel like that's such a loaded, dynamic question because it's so funny because even though I'm deep into my career, the things I've been doing over the past decade, I've done so many things. And so I feel like that's such a dynamic thing. So I would say just a couple years ago, a day in the life was me going into the laboratory and I was running an environmental swab study where I was isolating different organisms to see if there's a way that we can simultaneously detect foodborne pathogens. And that was my day in, day out role. And then a couple years after that, my day in the life was me working for the FDA, and I was reviewing biologic drug applications, making sure that the way they're manufacturing these drugs, that they're doing it in a way that they're following all sanitary practices. We call that CGMP, and making sure that they're doing everything they could to make sure there's no contamination of these new drugs, and making sure that their laboratories were doing their testing for organisms correctly, going on inspection, things like that. And then jumping forward now, my day in the life, I'm a director of microbiology and public health for the company that I work for. And here I'm responsible for helping to run and lead programs that are in support of different industries. And we collaborate and we set up clinical trial studies for them. We help to manage the teams and making sure that, in my case, we're working on a topical antiseptics program. We're basically testing the safety and effectiveness of things like hand sanitizers and hand rubs, and helping to coordinate testings and studies and making sure that they're doing their job so we can go prove that these ingredients are safe and healthy to the public. And so that's what really drew me to this conversation, because just in these the past decade of my life, I've done so much as a microbiologist, but when I started out, I had no idea that that was an option to even do all of this work. And so here I am now, I'm like, man, I really can apply my skills, not just at the bench, not just in the classroom. I used to teach and I love teaching, but I just felt like there's so much more I could do. And so I felt obligated to explore it.
I can definitely understand that. One thing that you mentioned was, you're testing these topical anesthetics right now, and that's a hot topic at the moment with everybody using hand sanitizer. I just saw an article the other day about, a couple brands of hand sanitizer that have toxins in them that actually aren't good for you to be using at the moment. And that was caught by people like you, who are testing these things and making sure we are safe as consumers. So, kudos to you for keeping us all healthy and happy, especially in this pandemic time. One thing that I know, being a former microbiologist, is there's two different branches of microbiology. Generally, there's the clinical and then there's the molecular. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more about sort of what the differences are between those two and where you fit in those categories?
I would say if I were to break down, I guess, more in depth where you can diverge if you're in microbiology, I would say from a clinical standpoint, okay, we're looking at infectious diseases and how people are contracting infection, how we can control infection, diagnose, treat, and cure diseases, things like that. That all kind of fits in that realm. And then we have the other realm of microbiology that explores just beyond the clinic. It can still be like a clinical application in terms of understanding how microorganisms work. So we have for example, a branch of microbiology would be a bacteriologist who studies bacteria. So you might study their genome and understanding, well, how do bacteria infect people? Like what is in their DNA that's allowing them to infect people, or what can we do to help find different ways to target and destroy organisms, or how can we use organisms to kill other organisms or to outcompete them, depending on what type of environment that we're putting them in. So we have all this I'll call it background work that leads up to what we see on the clinical forefront. And then outside of medical microbiology, we have environmental micro, we have food microbiology, all these different applications using microorganisms to clean up oil spills. You have when you're setting up surveillance systems for potential biological weapons and targets. It's almost makes you go crazy to think of how much you can do with microbiology. And I would say we have people at the forefront, at the closest realms to the patient, and that type of micro. And then we have the micro that's really exploring just the minutia of understanding the microorganism, and not just how they affect our personal health, but how they infect the environment, how they can be applied in the environment. It's a very vast field that offers a lot of opportunity.
Certainly, yeah. And there's a lot of processes and things to learn, and it can sound very very overwhelming, I think, initially to somebody who's not familiar with the field. But like you said, if you keep it simple and just you focus on one area, it's very digestible for anybody who's interested. So I wouldn't let that scare you away from potential career.
Not. Yeah, it's so much you can do, but that's a good thing, because at least if you get in the field and say, for example, you study viruses, you're like, oh, viruses are kind of boring to me. We'll go study bacteria, or go look at it from a clinical aspect, or maybe you're more concerned about the environment. So this is definitely a field that if you go into it, there's so many ways you can make it work for you. So you shouldn't feel scared or intimidated or limited, because there's always somebody that's going to use your skills. It's definitely a very vast and needed field.
Mm-hmm. Now, in all the skills that you have, all of your daily tasks that you're trying to run through, what would you say are a couple obstacles that you face on a day-to-day basis?
I guess it depends on how what the type of obstacle it is. Like, for example, in general, as a microbiologist, you kind of want to try your best to at least stay on top of what's going on in your field. Like, for example, me, working in the topical antiseptics program, like how you mentioned that they found out about that ingredient methanol that's being found in some of these sanitizers. Like, those are the type of things I should like keep on my mind. Like, okay, look up, what's going on with the latest and greatest with this. And I feel like that pretty much applies no matter what your space is. Just make sure you just try to stay on top of that. Because if you don't, then you'll find circumstances where you're in a meeting and somebody asks you, well, tell me about this outbreak. And I'm like, what? Coronavirus? What's that? I would say that could be an obstacle. But I think if I could turn the question a little bit and say, I think one of the most limiting obstacles is that even though you go into a particular field, like as a microbiologist, you're trained to think like a scientist. You are a scientist, but the biggest obstacle when a scientist keeps themselves in a box and you don't have or try to take advantage of other skill sets, like understanding business or understanding how to manage programs or how to manage a research study or anything like that. Like, there's so much that goes into microbiology that's not microbiology, and the same would be for any other field. And the limitation is when you come into circumstances where somebody asks, what you should do next, that doesn't require a technical answer in terms of microbiology or science, and then not being able to provide an answer because that's not your field, that's not your specialty. So to avoid those limitations, you should always try to stay at least a little well-versed in all kinds of different arenas, if that's the word for it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would agree with that. I know for me personally, trying to keep up with the literature and stuff is something that I did, like you said, as that was mandatory in the graduate process. But outside of the graduate process, even today as a professional, life science salesperson, I utilize a lot of those skills. I utilize those research techniques, that scientific thinking when I'm communicating with a potential client, so I can understand their processes and figure out where could they use, our product to help them. So you learn a lot of things that generally will be applied to life, not just microbiology. And that's what still keeps me so excited about it. Like, that's why I still am very interested in keeping up with what's happening. And I know for one of the things in particular is just having knowledge about this almost invisible world to us. These are things that we can't physically see with our eyes. We have to use a microscope or some sort of apparatus to be able to see what's going on at their level. But they interact with us on a daily basis. So it's really cool just to get a peek behind the curtain almost into this, micro world.
Absolutely. Like, I feel like that I agree. That's probably the most fascinating thing about it. Just the fact that our bodies are houses to entire ecosystems of different organisms and these organisms are here to keep us healthy and not even harm us. But just the idea that, 1 week full of stress or, sickness, and then all of a sudden the balance can be thrown off and you can be sick from these same organisms that are there to keep you healthy and safe. Things like that are just like what makes it so amazing to me. And just the fact that, it's funny, I have these conversations with people like, do you ever sit there and think about how small you are in the universe and like you really like put things in perspective? Because I'm just like, man, I'm just this little speck on Earth, and the Earth is a part of this galaxy, and then it goes on. But then you think down to the bacteria, they're like, you have these little bacterium all and it's just like mind-boggling. I'm just a nerd like that, but yeah.
No, I agree 100%. I've seen so many figures that show, at least looking at weight, how much in weight do humans make up the earth compared to, microbes, and they just so much more vast than we are, yet we know very little about them. And that room for exploration and opportunity to learn is really exciting. And that's what got me out of bed every day during the graduate process. Of course you have your specific projects which you're trying to make progress on and you're very excited about, but really just having the opportunity to learn more in general about that was super cool.
Absolutely. I agree.
So We're almost done here already. I know it's gone by so quickly, but I could talk about microbiology all day. I mean, this is just kind of what I love to do. I'm having a nerd moment here, but I want to ask you, you know, what's one misconception that you run into in your career?
I'll say, that's a good question. So one misconception I would say is that in general, and this may apply to other fields also, but when people see you as a microbiologist and they know that you study microorganisms, they assume that you know everything about every microorganism, every disease. You can sit there and explain, well, how does this infect you? Like even like with coronavirus, like I learned about coronavirus in grad school, but it's not like I never worked with it. But then like as soon as coronavirus emerged, oh, Ashley, how does this work? How does it, how does it affect you? And I'm like, well, I know there's a mechanism here, but let me go look that up and get back to you. Like, we know a lot, of course, but we know a lot about our specialties, and sometimes we can teeter off and know many things, but just give us a break. Give us a second to do our research. We can definitely come back with an intelligent answer, but we may not always know in that moment your answer.
Yes, please say it a little louder for the people in the back, because I get that all the time. I'm the first person they come to, and like I tell them, hey, I am not a physician. I do not understand how to treat you for anything. I can tell you how they work, but I can't tell you why whatever's happening to you is happening to you. But I digress because I can go down that road. So
according to CDC.
yes. I defer. Look at the CDC website. That's a good idea. So last thing here, what would be, a couple pieces of advice you would give young Black and brown youths who are interested in pursuing a career like yours?
I would say the number one things, because when I started college, like I knew I liked biology, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. Like I had no vision, no plan. I just knew I liked science. I would say the number one things I would say is if your school has a science or a STEM club, join it, because you'll get exposure that you may not normally encounter. If your school offers opportunities for you to go to like research conferences and either present, or maybe you don't even have to present, you can just go as a student and take advantage of just seeing all the research that's done and meeting different other colleges or graduate programs or people who are looking for interns. Take advantage of that, because it's crazy. When I started teaching undergrad, like I see, like it's like, I'm so happy for my students, but I'm just like, man, you guys are on it, because like I didn't do any internships when I was in undergrad. So I'm like, man, like there are freshmen coming to me for recommendations, like, oh, I want to apply for this and that. So look up your internship opportunities, just Google it. They are there, and a lot of programs are looking for minority students. And they need people to fill those spaces because they're really interested in reaching out, but a lot of students just don't know about it. Yeah. And so take advantage of that. And I guess, I don't know if that was number 3 or number 2, but I would say last but not least is build relationships with your professors. And like just really talk to them and pick their brain about their past. And what's valuable now that I didn't have when I was an undergrad are things like LinkedIn, or you see like these social media stars that are in STEM that everybody just so follows behind, like DM them or start commenting, get their attention, like ask them, what did you do to get here? Like I didn't have that back then. Like I would have loved to like have somebody to reach out to that can give you like, help you skip steps so you don't have to work so hard to like figure out how to get to your point. I want to make a point to say that when I was coming out of my Ph.D. program, actually before I even started my my postdoc, I actually did like a little in between at a nonprofit science and tech company, and so they did a lot of really cool work with like biological warfare agents and things like that. And what's funny is how I got the position is a former graduate from my department came back emailed the dean and said, hey, do you have a couple students who might be interested in this? And so I reached out and I interviewed with him. And so he brought me on, and like one of the first things he sat me down and said was like, look, like, I know a lot of times like minority students, we don't have the access to resources and opportunities. And he's done such amazing work. I'll shout him out. His name's Dr. Alvin Smith. He works with Caltech and NASA JPL, and he's awesome. But like one of the things he said to me was, I'm here because I know how hard I had to work. And he said, I'm trying to make it such that you don't have to cross all these hurdles that I had to cross to get here, because he didn't necessarily have that person to show him. And like, I really appreciate that. And I take that with me, because that's how I feel for people that I mentor now. Like, if I can find a way to try to get you, skip steps so you don't have to like do this for 5 years, do this for 10 years just to get to this point, then I'm happy to help people. And you want people like that. You want mentors. You want to latch on to them. Like, don't be annoying, but latch on to them. And, it's so valuable.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate those pieces of advice. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and your professional journey with us. And hopefully there's going to be, a couple young Black and brown youths who will say, maybe there is something to this microbiology thing out there. Maybe I would like to study up some more on coronavirus or Ebola or whatever it would be. So I really appreciate you coming on. And for everybody out there, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe to us so you can always stay up to date on the new careers and Black professionals that we're sharing with you. And finally, if you have anybody else that you would like for us to interview or talk to or share information about, then please let us know in the comments. And I will do my best job to jump on LinkedIn and make sure I get a hold of somebody that can provide some representation for that. So if you have any closing remarks, please do so at this time. Any shout outs you want to send?
Yeah. I would first of all like to thank you. Like, I really commend you for what you do. And I haven't seen anybody do anything quite like this. And it's really special. And I wish I had something like that when I was coming up. To everyone watching, I tell them to absorb everything, watch everything that you post, because you can learn so much. And this is just great. And I thank you for having me. Shout out to everyone who's been a mentor to me along the way. Oh gosh, Dr. Tremar Murdoch, Dr. Kenyatta Cosby. Those are like two major undergraduate mentors. My mom, my dad. Yeah, let me stop. But but yeah, thank you for having me. I'm happy to talk. Appreciate it. If anybody on there is watching and you want to look me up on LinkedIn, please feel free to send me a message. I'll be happy to chat with you.
Certainly. Well, with that has been another episode of the #Black Professionals Project. Thank you guys for tuning in again, and we'll see you next time.